Hey guys, happy Halloween. It's Eric in the alley. Today I got my buddy Jim's a Honda Accord. It's a 2003. I've had it in here a couple times. I put ball joints on it, but now speed sensor. We had to order one for the right wheel. But he's leaving it here till it gets in, and it started like crap whenever it was here before. And since then, I see he's gotten a new battery. He hasn't complained about the starting, but when I turned the key, it almost sounded like, it's bad compression, something, and it's, going wrong. So I hooked it up to Hscope, and I just did like a charging test, just 1 amperage, and I got a really weird waveform. And so since then, I turned to YouTube, searched around, and I found a real good creator, Justin Miller. He has a lot of videos, but they're done with a picoscope. I don't have one, so we're going to use his Hscope and then maybe back it up with the Modus, because I always like checking things twice, or at least seeing how it looks on something different in case that's the one you happen to be using at the time. But let me show you the waveform and why it looks kind of weird. But so you can see compression humps nice. But this waveform really does, look like the way it sounds. See all the dropouts in between? The more you zoom in, the more dropouts you see. This shouldn't drop out like that. These aren't the compression humps. This is just the amperage draw in the brushes. They're not making complete contact as this goes. You see, as you zoom out, these are the compression humps. We're zoomed in. This is just the amperage being drawn. And these are the brushes riding, and we could see there's fallouts. It got a really good image, and there's a lot you could tell from them. I watched them videos, I made some notes, and just little different things that kind of help you on an engine like that, because the starter, I'd like to do a voltage drop from the battery terminal to the starter lug, but it's behind the intake. I don't mind taking this intake off to put the starter on there, but just to do a voltage drop, if we could prove the starter's bad with a scope, I'll happily check out wire whenever I take the intake off to put a starter on. But they put it's a 500 cold cranking amp battery. These Hondas had small batteries, but I think this thing goes up over 500, at least on initial inrush anyways. And that's at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, guys, let me set that up. I'm going to put that on with the voltage because I want to see what's going on, totally. And then compare it to the video, and that's how I learn things. No, and one quick thing is, on this Justin Miller's channel, he has a video how to create a 1,000 amp current probe in your picoscope. I was going to look how to do it on Hscope after watching the video, but it is probably possible to do it if you wanted your amperage displayed. But it's the same theory. This is 1 millivolt equals 1 amp. But one thing I did learn from the video that is, good to know is these things will read a lot more than what they're rated for. It's just changing the scale. From a 600 amp clamp, he's changing the range to go up to 1,000 and then down to minus 100. It's pretty neat to watch. If you got a picoscope, he shows you how to set it up so your scales will all match. But for right now, with a scale that easy, 1 millivolt equals 1 amp, it's easy to just multiply that by 1,000. And then that's how many you have. How many amps you have. So you can, if you want to be technical about it, make the scale, put it in amperage, and use it as a probe. But what we're going to want to do is use it as a 1,000 amp clamp, because it will register more than 600. This is the biggest amp clamp I have. I only have the small one that's a 60 amp clamp or a 20 amp clamp. This is a 600. So this is the one I use for your RC test. But it's good to know that your readings aren't going to be as accurate over 600, but up to 600, you're not really going to be sacrificing anything. Just your scale will be there, it won't clip. Okay guys, first thing I always calibrate, but one thing it got me is whenever I calibrate to 0 level, I got the 2 alligator clamps together, I usually calibrate the scope with only one channel hooked up. But whenever I go to 0 calibration, it asks me if I want to calibrate 1, 2, or both. I've never calibrated channel 2. I assumed it was like the hand tech, wouldn't it? You just calibrate the whole scope by channel 1. But now that I have 2 together, I don't know if it does any benefit to calibrate the amp clamp. But I'll turn it on anyways and try it. If anybody knows how that, if that actually works, or if you should calibrate both of your channels. Because sometimes with these amp clamps, it never did seem like it was a good 0. But I think that's just the nature of the amp clamps too. But that, you know, got us on 0 anyway. Okay guys, that's how I got it set up. And one feature Hscope does have is the voltage logger. It's like a data logger, and you can log it over periods of time, or it works just as a voltmeter. Whenever I hook up to the battery, it gives you a pretty accurate, and you're, you know, this far away, and you could change the screen color, of course, and you get a pretty good view of your voltage from afar. If you're pulling fuses, if you're testing voltage somewhere, if you already got the scope out, keep the meter in the box and just take advantage of something you already got. There's a lot you could do on this that, you know, you could do for parasitic drain tests overnight. You could do a lot of things. I mean, Dennis on the Gadgets playlist, he has a lot that, I mean, they're Bluetooth, Wi-Fi data loggers. I mean, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of features. I mean, you get a lot of bang for this little scope, man. I mean, the scope, I mean, its size isn't that impressive, but I mean, what it does, the software on your tablet that you could play with, it's definitely more than what I'd expect. Especially at this price point, because you have the normal oscilloscope there, but we're going to the automotive module. And the sample rate for this, we're definitely going to want to put on the highest for 2 channels. We have 300, and we can go into page mode. Oh, you have to be off or record to change the rate. So now we're on 300 kilosamples. So you could go up higher, but this would engage page mode. The one part of the video I did watch, he said that you'd want the maximum amount of resolution. Usually I stay out of page modes. I usually don't even go up in 300. I'll stay at low, like 150 or 75. That's usually more than enough for ignition. And anymore, I'll just check things out. But this is one where he did recommend the most definition you could get. But without going into pages, that's 300 for 2 channels. So I'm going to switch over to the screen recorder so it actually, you could see the whole screen without no glare, just like it was on your tablet or phone. Start it up and let it go. The amp clamp, the green, that's the closest I could get at 0. There's a 0 wheel on the amp clamp itself, but that's the whole way. And we're about -8. It shuffles in between 7 and 8. But we'd have to remember that for an offset if we were going for an accurate measurement. So I'm going to just turn the key and let it run. I thought compression right off the bat, but yeah, the way his old battery looked, it couldn't, you know, very well could have been a battery, but now I see a nice shiny new battery in there and it still sounds like this. Now we're plugging in. And turn on the exhaust and open up the door a little bit. On the video I was watching, he was letting it go. Some were doing 3 or 5. I can't remember what I think he went on 5, but he also moved the amp clamp to the back of the alternator and then did like a load test on it. That would be a good thing to do if you're looking at the alternator, but I mainly want to see what's going on with that starter and why it sounds like that. But I want to get enough information. We could go for 3 minutes and 12 seconds total. So I'm going to let it run for a little bit and watch the voltage, because you see the voltage and the amperage. It would still be below 0, but that's charge going back into the battery. And this would be, it's pixelated down that low, but that would be our AC ripple, and still looks, it's enough to measure. You could probably clean it up a little bit too, but there's where we started. So we know we got a good image on the screen. Just filling it up with some time. I don't know if you could actually switch. Okay, max requisition. Okay, now I'm going to just save that while we got the chance. It's automatically saving it apparently. So I'm going to save that again. I also want to make sure it's there before I close this out. No, it's not yet, so I want to resave that. There we go, we're saving the file. I could shut the car off. The longer the file is, naturally the longer it takes to save. But that's it, 100%. Now what I also want to do before I look at that, I am going to let it enter page mode. I'm going to do the same test on it. I'm going to take the sample rate. I'll go up to 13,091. See what that looks like. And I think we'll be somewhere in between. I think we're going to see a lot of pages, but let's see. Okay, I'm going to stop that. Should be right on. So these would be the pages. On the bottom, I'm trying to keep it at, let me shut the car off. But these would be the pages, these lines, and I'm just keeping this centered on the event. You could see down in the bottom buffer here. I'm just pinching wide, and we could see which pages our pattern is on. Let's see if the eyeball works on pages. Yes, it does. See, there would be the problem with the pages on that part, actually, is we missed the beginning right in here. It was in between the pages. This isn't constant time. It's screen after screen after screen in your buffer. And that's definitely way more resolution than you'd need. You know, you wouldn't need to get in this fine, but we could actually see dropouts right there and there. So let me try it one more time. We're going to go somewhere in the middle. We'll go for 1200. Just see if we could get the starting event on one page. Stop it. We're still missing the very beginning. So let me take it down just double what we had, 600. Now, let's stop the car. Okay guys, so now I just went up the page mode. I doubled our sample rate. See all these in blue? That's the sample rate you could record on with 2 channels. It would be 600 with 1 channel. But we're going to go into page mode. We're going to just double our resolution. And we're going to see if we could catch the very inrush right whenever that starter latched. Shutting it back off. I'm not doing the charging part on pages. I just want to see if we could catch See, it's off the page right here. This would be the page of it before it spiked. And that's after it started. So we missed the initial inrush on pages. That's all right. I'm sure there's a use for it whenever you want the definition, but we could even see with that definition, we see these dropouts. We shouldn't see these anywhere. And see, that's what your waveform looks like zoomed out, because each one of these lines is its own page. It's one page of data recorded with that much definition. There's a lot of definition on that. But that would be if you're looking for something that small. Unfortunately, I was just looking to see if we could catch that inrush. But I think we got enough definition with 2 channels to take a better look at that and just kind of compare it to some of the specs and see what we see. You can tell it don't look healthy. Alright guys, I just did some switching around. Just confirm and double check. I hooked up the Modus and I got it on 2 channels. And on the test lead for the amp clamp, it's a BNC amp clamp. It's the same amp clamp I used on Hscope. I just use an adapter to turn it from banana jack to BNC. You could either build or purchase adapters to adapt back and forth between the scopes. That's what makes it pretty cool, because if you get some accessories, you could use them on any scope you got. But all right, I'm going to set up on a tripod, so I'm not going to be able to see it. The waveform comes pretty quick, but maybe you guys will catch it. I'll shut the light out, and then we'll take a look and see if it confirms what we saw on the Hscope. Okay, guys, this is the same test on the motors. See, I'm glad we actually caught that. That's what I was speaking of before. Let me pause that. I'm definitely going to want to save that in case. Save movie. Data saved. Okay, now I want to go to the preview. Manual. Okay, let me see if I can separate the channels a little bit. See, we're seeing the same thing that we saw in Hscope. Whenever the amperage goes down, the voltage goes up. So when the brushes are missing on this, I believe it's, it's not taking any voltage out of the battery, so it goes back up. And then the amperage goes down. And here, excuse me, here's where it actually stuck. And the amperage was down to like 0 whenever it stuck. The voltage was still down, but it wasn't down as much as whenever it was under a crank. So at this point here, there's no load on the battery, and you heard this come to an almost dead stop, almost like it was a compression related or a very dead battery. Then as soon as I turned the key again, it started. So we see the same things, dropouts everywhere. It's a little bit better to show on Hscope because it's, the pinch to zoom and the screen's bigger, but we caught the same thing, and it confirms what we were looking for. We could even see at the beginning the solenoid closing. And I mean, you see all the detail you can. Just a smaller screen. It's a little bit harder for me to zoom in and zoom out because you only have so many. I mean, you get very good detail, but it is a small screen. On Hscope, you're kind of like pushing the limits because you're making it as big as you want. This, you have your scales you have to follow, and it's a little bit harder to get exactly where you want in the waveform, but there's a couple things I didn't learn yet on it, and like how would I get the whole waveform on the screen? You have to record very zoomed in. Like there's the whole wave there, but it's hard to get in. But you could still see what's happening as the amperage increases. We're almost mirror imaging it. It's easier to show on Hscope, but we are seeing the same pattern. You could figure it out with either, really. Morning, guys. Last night I left the leads to the Modus hooked up. I was going to try to get a better image with that, but for what I'm going for, just comparing with other videos, that it was done on Picoscope, so the Hscope, it's getting me a lot closer to the image that the Modus would be usable for. But we did capture it on. If that was anything I had, you'd still be able to see, what we've seen with the Hscope. But I'm going to switch to a screen recorder and just show you a couple things I found, and seemed pretty neat to me anyway. Okay, this was just the raw data, what I got, just without any filters or anything on it. Oh, got to go back up to here. I could just hit the eyeball. But the thing that we wanted the max resolution and no filters would have been right here. Right on the amperage, the inrush. we could see pretty clearly. It's starting to get a little bit blocky right here, but we could still see without much detail that this starter didn't engage to the third try. And that's where I start, after I could see that, because we could look at this a lot better with a filter on, but we wanted to see a sharp line right here. We didn't want any filter on. But we can get rid of a lot of the blockiness and get a lot better image just by going to putting some filters on it. But you do get even without a filter, from afar, you're still being able to see what's going on here. I remember I did a quick RC test on this before, and I seen something like this, and I just didn't think nothing of it. So I'm glad I actually got another chance to, take a peek and I actually figure out what was happening and learn a little bit. But, well, that's Math Channel. I'm sorry. On channel 2, we could put a low pass filter. We'll just keep it at 1,000 for right now. And we could see that cleaned that up very good. Now on the voltage, on channel 1, as long as we don't lose any peaks, did we? I'd kind of keep an eye on it right here, and if I see that peak change, not really, just a little bit of the noise, but we'll, usually on the voltage, I don't use a low pass. On amperage, it really cleans it up, but it really didn't hurt us on the voltage either. But now we see how clean the waves are. Oh, it's running away on me. And if it does that, you can always just find it right again in the bottom. We could see we have, if we move the amperage up, everywhere the starter is missing and making that sound, the brushes are losing contact in here and just barely touching in places. Because it should be cranking, the amperage should be staying solid. There shouldn't be no dropouts here. These dropouts it's just going to ground because the brushes are barely touching. But every time that the amperage, whenever it goes back low, the voltage goes back up. And then every time the brushes touch, the voltage goes down, just like it's supposed to. But we could just see it's like a mirror image. The green one is the amperage and the blue is the voltage. And every time it tries to return the battery voltage, the amperage goes down to 0. And then in here, the brushes are just barely touching. Now, you could even invert it, which this would be doing it. It's not supposed to look this way, but this is, you could just see, for comparison, but the amount of detail is what's really nice, because some of the tests that I did see on the Hscope being done, you could see the same thing with Hscope. Oh, you got the green one back up top now. You can always use the eyeball. Oh, I put channel 1 on invert, I'm sorry. channel 2 I want to take off of invert. So now we're back to where we should be. And then with the filter on, we could get a little bit more to see what's going on with the amperage. You could see everything from the time the key was turned on, right in here. Right in this area, that's where the current ramp for the solenoid and the contact's closing. And then you could actually see the solenoid starting to move that little hump there. It's almost like a fuel injector pintle hump, but that's just the contacts moving, closing, and then it engages the starter. But in this case, it tried a couple times before it actually did. We see dropouts right in here. And we see them everywhere. Everywhere in the waveform, we could see the dropouts occurring, and just pretty neat to see them, you know, counter occurring on the voltage. And the amount of, yeah, I mean, it's very, you know, comparable. You could watch a video done on a picoscope and with an Hscope manipulate, you know, similar results pretty easy. You know, with the Modus, it would have been a little bit harder for me to, I mean, just even compare, you know, because we're on a different kind of screen. And we could even see the little voltage drop whenever the key was turned. I mean, before the ramp for the contacts to close. That's pretty decent. And I believe we could even go in far enough, because we could see after it started running down here. Right here is where the engine would have started running, and the starter's still dragging across a little bit. You could kind of hear it bouncing around after the engine starts running, and then amperage starts going back into the battery. We stay negative, so. And if I'd have went further out, like after 5 minutes, this line should still be negative, but you could do a load test then and watch and, you know, see how many amps you're putting on it. This you could even see after we're running. This would be the AC ripple in the voltage. So, I mean, there's, you know, it doesn't look 100% normal to me, but I'm not 100% sure what I'm looking for. So, but it's, you know, the alternator's charging plenty good. But I mean, this is just your AC ripple. If you wanted to measure it, you know, you're more than able to. You know, 114 millivolts. And it's, some you hear 250 millivolts, some 500 millivolts. Just with a simple measurement, I mean, you could check the AC voltage like that. But that would be from the battery. You can do it from both, but it's better from the alternator if you're going to check the AC ripple. But it's, I mean, I figure if you could get 2 results from one test, I'd imagine if I had a high close to the limiter, close to the spec there, then I'd go check it right at the alternator. But if you're already hooked up for a charging test, you could take measurements how many amps it drew, 572 amps. You could see the voltage if you wanted to check the voltage, how low the voltage went. 9.37, so the battery is definitely good, and it's the 595, that's fairly good too. I mean, the way this thing sounded, it would sound like it's taken a lot more amperage, especially to just when it gets to this part. This is the part that makes it sound like the engine just locked up because it's tight. It's just losing contact. Battery voltage actually goes up and the amperage goes down. Doesn't go the whole way down to zero, and it doesn't return the whole way to the battery voltage. So you could hear that the motor is stopped. It sounds like it's straining, but according to this, right when we hear that sound of it straining, where I was worried about compression or something being tight, it's just losing contact. And that's just the engine coming to a stop. It makes us think that something's causing that to sound like that, like a compression issue. But I mean, right now, you can't even do an RC test on this because, well, you could see a little bit from the beginning. These are your compression humps here. We're zoomed way into them. And what we'd want to see here, you do see some noise when you zoom into these, but it should be all repeating about the same height, same width. The line should be moving, but it should be the same height, the same even width, and then we're down to this. Well, it's pretty cool being able to, tell all that. I've never use this like to actually see what's going on with a starter like that. That would be a good situation because it is behind the intake. It's there's a lot of tests. Even your simple test light test going to the starter battery post is compromised by an intake manifold. So if we could tell this much about a starter, like after watching that video and playing with this a little bit, I could tell that his battery's good. I could tell that his alternator's good. But what I'm seeing in the starter, not being able to test that wire, I'd still be able to call the starter because, I mean, what we're seeing is brushes losing contact. If we were having exceedingly high amperage and the starter motor physically struggling to turn, then you'd be more suspect to that wire. That you wouldn't want to call the starter until you either owned that wire out or checked it for voltage drop, which I'm going to do anyways if, Jim ever wants to replace his starter. It's original 200,000 mile starter, and I doubt he will until it actually quits. But either way, it's good to know, and it's like, hell, it might even be something I'll tear apart the starter, save this waveform, and tear apart the starter whenever I do get it, take it out. But I don't know, it'll probably be a core charge, but but it's just pretty neat to be able to see it on one that is like that you can't do a lot of traditional tests with. Just from clamping onto the battery, we tested this whole system. And once again, Hscope, I mean, I like the detail. And see, when them brushes are barely making contact right in here, it does not go back up the battery voltage. It is drawing some voltage, and it's not going back to 0 amps. So it's just pulling a little bit because this brush is just barely making contact. And then it starts making more contact and overcomes it and goes till them brushes come up again. All right, pretty neat. It's almost any motor you could test like this, and it's some things with a small screen, even like the Hscope, it didn't make this as like enjoyable to go along with because you could really play around with this and look at it any way you want it, but either way, it took two good waveforms, and if you wanted to, you could go back just with amperage and get twice the resolution. But to me, you know, I'm not going to complain about that resolution. That's good to me. Now, one other thing, guys, wanted, being I did save an image of it, this was whenever I had it on page modes. And it might sound confusing of why you'd be doing it on page modes, but if you're looking for something with so much detail, the detail this was taken in is a lot higher than we could do on one screen, but we're not flowing in right time. It looks like these are all straight lines, but this is one page and then another page, then it's like one screen after another screen after another screen. But could something have technically happened in here? Yes. So you're gonna have to, you might have to take a couple saves, captures, until you get to the part you wanted to see with that much detail. Like this would be looking for a glitch or something that you needed even more resolution than we were looking at. But see, like right here is where the amperage would have spiked, and we missed it. There might have been a way to move a trigger to get it somewhere else, you know, but we didn't get it. We missed it there, but if we needed this super enhanced resolution, I mean, look what we're getting into. We could see a lot more of them dropouts occurring than we've seen before. And the resolution, I mean, it's not breaking up. It's not even pixelating there. There we're starting to be able to see the dots, but I mean, look how far we're zoomed in on that. That's just one line of I'll give you even more. And it takes that much to get it to even show a pixel. So, I mean, as we draw out on the whole picture, and then you just click on your page till you find a glitch you want. You zoom in on what's on the page. You can see them, but like I said, we missed the inrush occurring on that. That's the only part I would have wanted to see with that much resolution. But that's how Pages works anyways. And it's a pretty good feature. I haven't had a use for it yet, but it is nice. You know, just looking at some of the same images you take and seeing how much more detail is available. In case you ever need it, it's good to know. Here's an example. If you wanted, this is just, we're way out after the starting event. This is just the AC ripple. Even though it goes across several pages, we're 136 pages out. You could see the lows and the highs, so you could still take a measurement even though it's on page mode. .26 at this actual point. And I mean, we're the difference, even this note's this large on the screen right now. That's how much detail we got, that we're going in 30 milliseconds per division on several pages. So we have a lot of information there. We could see that ripple fine. then you could even zoom in like that, because we could see after I even zoomed in a little bit more, but we're kind of getting the average there, so we're still all right. But you could zoom in so much that it's, if you were going after the ripple, it might not be bad to take a use page mode. But you could see an individual page. That's not giving you a lot of it. You know, that's so much so zoomed in that you're not going to want to use a single page. Unless you're looking for an intermittent dropout that only occurs every, so often, just hope you catch it. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. I just wanted to, show you that on Hscope and some of these other scopes, you can go to a video like at Justin Miller. Those are excellent videos, and they're done on a 2-channel non-automotive picoscope. I believe it's 2204A, which is probably going to be the next scope that I go with, just because it and Hscope. I always like having a scope to back up another scope, and some scopes will do some things better, like the portability, the pinch to zoom, everything on Hscope is never going to be replaceable. It's not good. A Pico's not going to be able to replace that, and Hscope's not going to be able to replace a Pico, because a lot of the things we learn and a lot of the known good waveforms we can find are on Pico. Hscope has a waveform library that's growing, and it's it's going to be the two platforms that I am going to use, just back each other up, because there's other platforms like Autel and Top Dawn. They all got very good oscilloscopes. I mean, but for me, the laptop and the tablet and all the leads, everything I got that'll work on both of them, those are going to be my two go-tos. So in the future, look forward to some of them with the comparing Hscope with the Pico and being able to get the same things on both of them. But Hscope, it always impresses me, going in on page mode and seeing how much detail's there and how much more's there than you're probably ever going to need. That's a good feeling than zooming in on something and it looks like Space Invaders with the little blocks. There's some detail there, and that's a good way to get the AC voltage on there. I wasn't even aware of that, but whenever I backed out on page modes, I seen that AC wave. I mean, that's very easy to measure, because you're measuring over pages. Even though you're not in real time, you could still see the wave. All right, guys, well, have a good one. Hope everybody had a happy Halloween, and just keep on scoping it, man. Adios. One last note, guys. This is a starter or a window motor out of an '86 Lincoln I put in Sean's car, a town car. It was very high resistance, but this thing is not open. And this is it was rusted solid. The regulator wouldn't even move. I had to soak it for 2 days and then gingerly move it till the doorman would do the job. But these are very good. I have an old starter too. I mean, it's been so long since I've torn any of these apart. Find something like this, tear it apart, check out the brushes, check out everything in it, then gives you a little bit more understanding of what you're seeing on the scope. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't have to be a huge starter. You don't have to do it on anything working. Just take something apart. Then you know a little bit more about what you're seeing on the waveform, and just helps put things together in your head. All right, guys. Thanks again for watching. Adios.